Hello friends, I'm Layla Harris and I'm back to show you a technique video on how I use the Love Blossom stamp set and colored with my watercolor pencils. I'm jumping right into this technique video with my image already stamped. I use the Versamark and some of the Close to My Heart black embossing powder. At this point my image was already stamped and I'm going to show you a trick with heat embossing. I could emboss from the top, but I'm tired of blowing my powder off of my stamped image, and so I am heating from the backside. This is on watercolor paper, so it's really sturdy and it takes the heat really well, and I did not burn my paper without looking, but it is fun to watch the embossing come alive. Doing it this way, I didn't blow off my embossing, and I did have a darker image than I would have usually. I'm sure if I was to refresh my Versamark or buy a new one, this one's quite old, I would have a darker image and the embossing powder would cling. But here I am making do with what I have. When I emboss, I usually angle my embossing tool across the paper, not directly at it, so that the heat is concentrated at one spot and then it blows warm air across the part that hasn't melted yet. That way it starts melting, it's a little faster, and I don't get any burns. You can see it's all embossed with the shininess in the reflection of the light there. So let's get started. Okay, I'm doing a voiceover because my family's right beside me and it's all noisy. So I have 3 different sizes of water brushes from Close to My Heart, and I'm going to use the medium round one versus the smaller one that I had picked up earlier. I'm also using the colored pencils that we sell from at Close to My Heart, and I just keep them all in a tin, and a while back I numbered them when I first got a package of them. Actually, it was my customer's package, and I just put mine back in order. And that, whether you have them numbered or not in a particular order, it's really helpful to know what each color comes out as. For example, the orange, the darker pencil actually colors lighter. But here I'm going for a couple different shades of pink and a couple different shades of green for this card. Okay, here I'm finally settled in and I've chosen my colors, and I have a lime and an olive and then kind of a Kelly grass green and then 2 shades of pink. It isn't necessary to have 3, but I do like to have a couple different variations, especially for the leaves. I'm using my watercolor brush and I'm going over the entire flower right now with just water. Now, if I had a little bit of color residue left in my water brush, that wouldn't be a problem. I sometimes do that, but the first thing you want to do is to wet your coloring surface. And here is the watercolor paper. I bought it off the Close to My Heart website. And it does have a texture and is quite sturdy, and it hasn't ever roughed up and pilled, and it just works beautifully because it is watercolor paper. So did you see that? I actually did not use my pencil to watercolor with. I am stealing color off of the sharpened tip of the pencil, and it comes in rather intense, and then you can kind of lighten it and push the water around. I really like doing this because these watercolor pencils are beautiful. They don't have a ton of pigment like our watercolor paint set, so they're not opaque. I guess I should say the pigment is not opaque. It is clear, so it doesn't cover up the stamped image, whether it's stamped or embossed. I also like the fact that we have 30 colors, and between my guide on my little scrap of paper and the paint on the pencils, I know what colors I'm getting. I also love watercoloring with my water brush because there's just no mess. You don't have a rinse pail or a rinse coffee cup of water. When you need to clean it, you just squeeze the water into a tissue. So here I'm primarily doing the darker of the 2 shades of pink, but I do take a little bit of the lighter pink. You'll see at the end of this video several more examples of where I have used all sorts of colors for this technique. I am doing each petal separately now that I have a coat of water on it when I'm coloring them. That way I can kind of push the color around and make one part darker, and when I'm done with it I will move on to the next petal. Don't worry, I will go back and add some more color in a bit. In a second here I'll grab a tissue and I'm cleaning my brush. Evidently I had a little bit too much water in it, so I just dried it off. It's good to have that. And if you have too much color or too much water, you can always blot it off. I am just using a tissue because that's what I have handy. If you want something a little bit more durable, feel free to use a paper towel. Now I'm coloring the berries. I use the lighter pink first, and then I'm coming back with the darker pink and I'm just dotting it. And I'm letting it flow into the lighter pink, and you'll see a gradient at the end. So now I'm changing to green, and I squeezed some water out and wiped it on my tissue, and that is all the mess I had in a color change. It's so different than using a coffee mug full of water that gets gray. So I inadvertently picked up some color before I started wetting down my leaves, and so now I'm just letting that go, and I will come back and repaint each leaf individually. But right now I'm just putting a quick coat of light green water on the first row of leaves across the top of the page. Okay, I am not the best at coloring leaves, but I do know that leaves have multiple shades and stuff. So I just added the darker green down the center of the leaf on one side, and then I added some more of the bright green or limey green along the other half of the leaf, just to give it shading and contrast. I'm not trying to be any scientific. I'm sure this is not even a rose. It looks more like some other type of flower. But so just feel free to add color however you like. You'll see I have some blue and purple flowers at the end of this video that I show on some other cards. But one thing I really do like about this process is that it's really fast and it's really gentle on the wrist. When I color, my hand gets tired. But since I'm not pressing hard on the paper, I don't feel that fatigue. And I was able to color like 6 of these last night, and I never got tired until I had to glue them together. So that's the whole process. It's not really hard. It's just stealing a little bit of color off of the tip of your pencil with your water brush and applying it that way. You can also do it with an ink pad. Don't do it directly to the ink pad, but squeeze some ink out onto the lid. But I really enjoy this because you don't get the streaks and the lines, and it's just really easy and relaxing, and you're painting instead of coloring. So I hope you enjoyed this process video. The rest of this video will talk about how I assembled my card, and you are free to continue watching. For the sake of video editing and just continuing on with this project, I lightly heated the flower to get it dry. You don't want to get the heat embossing tool nearly as close to the paper as you did when you heat embossed, because then the embossing powder would melt again. So you just wanted to get it dry, and you can put a little air on the back of the card too, and that also keeps it from warping as much. This is watercolor paper, so it doesn't warp too bad. I am using one of our stitched rectangle dies, and I'm going to cut out this. It will cut it down to a 5 by 3 3/4, and from a 5.5 by 4 1/4 piece of paper that I started with. I like this rectangle die because it gives really great interest, and it's really easy to use and that. So I was a little bit intimidated by the die and making sure that it was actually going to show up the correct way and not fall off the edge of the paper and so I don't know why, because I had cut my paper the right size, but so I had and cut the first couple of these upside down, which meant I cut into my top plate. Usually I reserve the top plate for the top of the die and that, but I didn't discover that until later. I made 6 more of these last night, so it did work out and I got a little bit less worried about it at the end. Okay, I just realized that I need to add a sentiment if I'm going to make this card complete. So bear with me. I am going to do that, and I have to pull some things off my desk. Here I added powder to the card with our little embossing buddy so that we only have the embossing powder stick where it was stamped. It's also best to get your work area prepared so that you can emboss right away. I have a tray to catch my powder, but lately I've just been using a sheet of printer paper to catch it and put it right back in. And it's handy because I can continue using it for other things too. One of the great things about embossing on a project that's nearly complete is that if you make a mistake before you heat set it, you can go back and fix it. It's not just for preparing embossing, it's also great for fixing your embossing mistakes. Okay, one thing I want to say about embossing is do not ever get this black mat hot, ever. It will warp. I just nearly destroyed mine last year in another how-to video, and I'm really glad it flattened back out and I caught it before I made the mistake. Our other mat, which is tan colored, is a non-stick mat. That's an all-purpose mat, and it is fabulous for embossing, but it's currently in use in another part of my room. To finish this card, I added the words "so" to make the full sentiment "so thankful." I then allowed it to dry completely and attached it to a mat of black cardstock sized at 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I didn't show this in the process video because that is something I usually do and it's a common thing. Though I want to say that with watercolor paper, you want to use quite a bit of adhesive to do that. Here is the finished card. Thank you for watching this video and please subscribe. These are a few other cards I made along the way and using the same technique. Thank you for watching and have a great day.